This is the Go Radio Business Show.
Well, Tom, loads of interesting stuff to talk about this week.
I think there's been a lot going on, Willie, so I'll let you kick off. I know you're excited. So what are you excited about this week, Willie?
I'm excited by the fact that something that we've been talking about for months and months and months, that Scotland is making substantial progress in our quest to get to 100% clean energy, right? So it turns out in 2024 that we generated 38 terawatts, right, of electricity. By the way, tera's a lot, I can tell you. Right?
That's a lot.
Right. But really, so it was an increase of 13.8%, right? And what we've done previous, well actually it's 8.2% above our record. And I think that this is brilliant. So for the listeners and viewers, to put this into perspective, if we just continued on that vein, right, we would be at 100% clean energy by 2030, which is better than the target. And my point in all of this is, if we continue doing that, and the suppliers, the deliverers of the energy, the cost is on them, then there is no need or no race to put the burden of going green to individual consumers. So to put a house price up by 30 grand by having to fit all the things that they're saying, why don't we wait until we get to 100% clean energy, and then we should use all this money of making the fabric of people's houses better, rather than, going down the route of heat pumps, solar, batteries. I'm not saying they're not a good thing, but we could save all this money and invest that in the fabric, which would ultimately bring the bills down even further. What do you think?
So I think you're spot on, as usual. I think the other interesting person who's got a point of view in this is Greg Jackson, who's the founder of Octopus Energy. And I'm delighted to say Greg's agreed to speak at our Scale Up conference in Gleneagles in November, Willie.
Brilliant.
So I think him and Keith Anderson of Scottish Power could have a really good debate, because what Greg Jackson has said is Scotland could and should have the cheapest electricity in Europe because they produce it. And you and I have always talked about this. How come our bills are so high when we've got offshore wind, we've got onshore wind, etc.? And there's this phrase called zonal pricing, which basically means if it's made in Scotland, it's consumed in Scotland, and therefore it should be cheaper. Now, he believes that. He's a real disruptor, which I love. Keith Anderson of Scottish Power, who's the incumbent, doesn't agree with it. But let's get the jackets off and have a fight. Because I think it's a brilliant debate to have.
So on that, I'm going to use that. I'm going to get Boyd Turnock back on and see if that means that we can get our Carmel Waivers and Carmel Logs a bit cheaper because they're only made 5 minutes up the road.
So, I've been looking into data centres, Willie, because we've got a big site out at Winchborough, and everybody's telling me it's perfect for a data centre. But the thing that stops it happening is power.
Yep.
The UK, let's just talk about the UK, has the most expensive electricity in Europe. I don't know why. And people have told me, Tom, you're never going to get a data centre there because the power's too expensive. But if you listen to Greg Jackson, he's saying use the offshore wind, the onshore wind, and zonal pricing for it. And the amount of jobs that could create would be amazing, Willie.
And it's not only, Tom, that it's more expensive, it's not there. That would be a huge lag on the grid if we had to get the power to power up a data centre. It was interesting, our guest last week told us that there's not been planning permission granted for one data centre in Britain. Right? Because of the point you make. But going back to being serious, that all of this clean energy has came from wind, tidal, solar, all of that mix. But it's interesting that most of it is 30 of the terawatts, of the terawatts has came from wind. So that is obviously our number one new clean energy source. So I would just say to the politicians, well done. Right, well done that whatever we're doing, and well done to utility providers that they've got there. But I would say now to everybody, let's stop panicking about targets. If we can do this at this rate, we'll have 100% clean energy by just after 2030. Let's do it.
And wouldn't that be amazing, Willie?
Yeah.
Scotland leading the world once again.
So, Tom, I know that you're busted to talk about budgets.
So, Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor of Exchequer.
Yep.
Maybe your Chancellor, maybe not mine. As a mini budget, she's calling it a spring statement. She only wants to do one fiscal event a year, which I understand. But here I go on my rant, Willie. This is Tom's rant of the week. There's no economy in the world that's ever taxed its way to growth. So you and I agree that the way that we can take care of the folks who can't take care of themselves is to grow the tax take in Scotland and the rest of the UK. Economic growth. The only people who disagree with us are the Green Party. Fair enough. Everybody's got a point of view. But what Rachel Reeves did back in the autumn by putting up a tax on jobs, this is the national insurance rate going up and the threshold coming down, I believe it's bad for employment, it's bad for growth, it's bad for the tax take, and it's bad for inflation. You know, I had a group of people at Blair this week for a scale up with John Scott, who sold his pallet business for over £300 million. It was an amazing story. And I had 30 entrepreneurs in the room, and I could really feel the anger of saying, goodness, we're getting taxed to the hilt. So if just one of those businesses said, well, look, because of this, and the tax increases come in next month, if just one of them say, I tell you what, my business is finely tuned, so I can't afford this, so I'm going to lay off one person. So that one person gets laid off, so the tax they were paying disappears, the NI they were paying disappears, but worse than that, they then go and sign up for benefits. So it's a double whammy.
Yep.
And the tax take goes down. So I don't understand, and I know you've spoken to the Chancellor and you've spoken to Jonathan Reynolds. This is O-level, economics. I'm not being clever here. This is what you and I know. Business people have to make these tough decisions. And I don't know why she's not listening. So what do you think?
Well, again, I said before, I don't know what group we haven't fallen out with yet. So now we're going to fall out with the people who need the most help. And I agree. We've said that. I've mentioned it in weeks. We should get the people who are claiming benefits who shouldn't be claiming benefits. Right. But the people who need help, hopefully, we should, every time that we make an announcement, before the announcement's made, Sky News or BBC or whoever it may be are in front of a worst case scenario. They go to someone's house, who's an invalid and they need help and it looks like the benefits being cut. But we don't see them in front of all these young, able people who are all getting £1,200 a month, contributing nothing. And I think we mentioned it last week. The most damning figure out of all this, Tom, only 20, for the people who say every week about let's tax the rich, and feed the poor, only 25% of the people in Scotland who are able to contribute are contributing. Right, that's a recipe for disaster. Right, we've got to get more and more of our population contributing to the tax take. That's a must. Or I can tell you, the problems that the Chancellor has at the moment are going to get worse and worse and worse. We have said it. I'll guarantee you that probably 90% of all councils in Britain, if they were a business like me and you had businesses, right, they'd need to go into administration, right, or go bust, because every one of them is virtually running at a deficit. We know where to go. It's getting worse and worse all the time. So I don't know what we're trying to achieve here, but I totally agree with you that taxing and cutting is great. We need innovation. We need to create new jobs, well-paid jobs, and I think that some of the things that we've done so far has not been putting us in the right path. Now, it's interesting, there's a few figures that this week you see, inflation's down, but for me, over the next 6 to 9 months, if we don't come up with something innovative, now, to be fair, they're doing a lot in house building, there's another 2 billion, so hopefully that'll create jobs, and they are saying there is green shoots, but I would just like to see proof of that all of these measures that we're talking about, right, are going to bear fruit, because for me at the moment, it's difficult to see where the growth comes from. And I read today, we've talked about it, that I see that Mittal, after 3 decades of living in the UK, one of the largest steel tycoons in the world, is moving because of the change to the non-dom status. Right. I don't think he's doing that. I don't think he's doing that to save tax. Right. I just think he thinks that it's not a good idea overall.
Yeah, I think people who are listening to the show will get this more than the general population. But when the general population hear there's a rich billionaire going to leave Britain, there's this feeling of good riddance. But what I would say is you're not getting the point. Somebody like Lakshmi Mittal does pay tax in Britain. He doesn't, he's not evading tax, but he's saying, I don't want to pay it on my worldwide income, and I certainly don't want to get caught in the inheritance tax to passing it on. But somebody like Mittal, I don't know the numbers, but he could be paying for maybe 20,000 people on benefits, Willie. So if he leaves Britain and he says Britain's not a place to invest in, to create new jobs in, to do the innovation in, who's going to pay for the people who really need our help? And that's an issue. That is an issue. And Stephen Montgomery of the Scottish Hospitality Group, he's been hitting his head off the wall for a long time now, trying to speak to governments about helping the hospitality sector, which is really going to take a hit with this NI. And he said the hospitality sector is increasingly losing confidence in the Chancellor. Now, I have got some sympathy with Rachel Reeves, because everybody seems to have forgotten why we're in this fiscal state. It's a thing called COVID. And COVID cost about, they're still counting the cost, but say cost £70 billion with furlough, with helping businesses with CBILS, with reducing the VAT rate, so we're all having to bear the burden of that, which I am happy to bear. I know quite a lot of it wasn't administered properly. A lot of businesses saw 50 grand as a free 50 grand, then they folded the company. I had a very simple solution for that, was if you wanted to borrow money at that point, personal guarantee it. And then you just saw who really needed it. But I do have sympathy with the Chancellor, but she's, by her own fiscal rules, she hasn't given herself much wriggle room. And she's saying, I need to show the world and people that the government borrow from that UK is run fiscally substantially. And I'm not Liz Truss, whatever her name was, who really mucked it up. So
It's not to be
I
trusted.
do have it. Yes. But, she said we're living in a changing world. And before she had sat down, she was on her feet in the Commons. Before she'd sat down, the bold Donald had slapped 25% tariffs on cars, and 17% of the UK's output of cars goes to the US. So that could have blown her figures out the water. So I do have some sympathy with her, Willie. But please listen to people like you, listen to people in small businesses. That's the lifeblood of the UK. It's the lifeblood of Scotland. And I don't think the politicians get it.
No, they don't. They don't. And what there certainly is there's no joined up thinking. So what if Donald Trump does this and what if Donald Trump does that? All of the measures that she's taking at the moment, I believe that after all of this, she may be left with about 13 billion of headroom. These tariffs that are going to be slapped on us if it happens, and it looks like they could wipe all of this out in a heartbeat. Right. All these measures will look minuscule as to what this could mean to export, and what it could mean to the GDP in the UK. And I don't know what that's going to end. But let's move to a couple of good time stories.
Can I leave on a positive note?
Yes.
She is upping the defence spending
Yep.
by about 2.2 billion, and that is going to be good for Glasgow, Willie.
Yeah.
BAE Systems
Yeah.
is going to get a chunk of that money, so they should take on more apprentices, create more jobs. So that's a bit of good news for Glasgow.
Yeah, for BAE and for Thales, over at Govan, this could be brilliant news, and for apprenticeships and everything. So you're right. And again, go back to the house building. Hopefully that will give us a boost in Scotland. But I think that, two bits of really good news this week. I see that that Glasgow has jumped in the global financial index. That's for financial districts throughout the world, and it's jumped up, I think, to number 32. So I think the JP Morgan, the Virgin Money, the what else? Barclays. Yeah. And I think that all of these companies now coming to Glasgow, big new lovely buildings along there, just on the river, I think is wonderful. So well done to Scottish Enterprise. Well done to the local authority. We're always good at having a go when under things, right? But I think that is absolutely brilliant news. And Edinburgh still sits at number 28. So this is, in a global index, that's not bad. We're heading in the right direction.
We're punching above our weight, Willie.
Another good news. What about the company for the US, Hallam Industries, now opening up in Glasgow? So a 28 million investment, hopefully ultimately ending up with 250 new jobs in Glasgow. I think, again, to everybody, to Scottish Enterprise, the local authority, anybody who played a part in attracting a US-based business who's at the heart, I think, of the gaming industry, the animation of the gaming industry. I think they do a lot with Fortnite and some of the other big games. So well done, and that's a great capture.
So I think your point is well made, Willie. It's an LA-based business. They could have put their capital anywhere in the world. They have chosen Glasgow. So Scottish Enterprises did a good job at selling Glasgow to them. They've obviously invested about £4 million as well. And this studio's worked on the Batman movie. They've worked on the Fortnite, which is the world's biggest game, I believe.
Yep.
Maybe Chris Van der Kuyl would say it's Minecraft. But, they could have went anywhere, Willie, and they chose Glasgow.
And while we're on a roll, what about Kelso Pharma? Right, the pharmaceuticals company, they operates in Glasgow, Milan, Milton Keynes. They've secured 140 million of funds and a debt facility to go on an acquisition spree and rapidly expand the growth of their business. Great news again for a Glasgow-based business.
So amazing numbers there, Willie.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I just want to quickly finish with is that there seems to be somebody interested in Prestwick Airport, taking it out of the hands of the Scottish Government. And I firmly believe government shouldn't be running businesses. But as I've said many times, I think the government had to step in at Prestwick because of the quality of jobs and the aero engineering and the engines and the building the wings, etc. There's a lot of good jobs there. But they're saying they can't say who it is. At this stage, it's commercially sensitive, but let's hope it goes to a good home who's going to invest in it, Willie.
Right. So let's finish here with a wee item that will probably take up a few more minutes in the weeks to come. I see today that Nigel Farage has announced that he wants to put a US-style think tank together of big business, the way that America, where big business has a major sway in government. So what do you think of this move or this announcement by Nigel Farage?
So listen, you and I know, and to be fair to the Labour Party, the Labour government, they have put in their mini budget that departmental spending has to come down by 3.5 to 4 billion by 2030. So they are looking at it as well. I'm probably a wee bit disappointed it's taken Nigel Farage to come up with this, because any of the, Labour could have did it, the Tories could have did it, the SNP could have done it, but I don't think they will. So I am for it. I think rather than whenever there's a deficit, say, oh, we've got to tax people more, let's look at how governments are spending our money. Are we getting a bang for our buck? Is everybody sitting at home and not contributing? I'm being provocative here, I understand that. But let's, before we just put the taxes up, see how we're spending, how governments are spending my money and your money.
Okay, I think that's a good point to end this segment on.
The Go Radio Business Show with Hunter and Haughey. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode.
Tom, brilliant main guest in the show this week. We've got Lewis Gillies, who's the CEO of Haventus and the Haventus Port. Welcome to the show, Lewis.
Hi, Willie. Hi, Tom. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, I think there must be a delay in the line. Are you in Australia or somewhere far away, Lewis?
Not quite that far. I'm in sunny Hampshire, down in the south of England at the moment.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
Well, listen, I think our viewers and listeners are going to love your story, because I've just been reading all about it. So, do you want to just start about where you were growing up, and was there anything in your parents or your education or growing up that ever pointed to this entrepreneurial career?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's nice to be here, and it's unusual to actually talk about myself, so I'll give it a go. So, I grew up in a village called Shawbust, which, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a very small village on the edge of the world. It's actually on the west side of the Isle of Lewis. So, probably figured out by now I'm Lewis from Lewis,
Yeah.
and my father and my grandfather were sheep farmers and Harris tweed weavers, and
Wow.
my mother's side of the family were, I would say, all entrepreneurs. They all owned their own businesses of sorts. So I grew up there. I was one of 4 kids. I was one of about 25 cousins on one side and 15 on the other. And that back in those days was what you call cheap labor, because we pretty much lived off, everything that sustained us, we either caught, killed, or grew. And that's just the way it was, back in the 70s and early 80s in
Wow.
Lewis. And it was a wonderful place to grow up. You had all the freedom you could ever ask for as a kid, and fond, happy memories of it all. And so I stayed there all through school. And like everybody else from the island, everybody pretty much went off and did one of 3 or 4 different things. You either went to the Merchant Navy. There's a strong heritage of that.
Right.
Or you went to either offshore or to one of the fabrication yards, Arnish, Ardeshir, Nig, one of those places. Or you went to university. And I got to admit, when I was growing up, I was quite attracted by the money and the brand new cars all these guys were, living with and running around in when they were working offshore. But I was lucky enough to have the invisible hand of my father always on my back, directing me towards education. And he enlisted a couple of teachers in the process, and had some fantastic teachers growing up there in school. 2 in particular, a technical teacher whose nickname was Glendy, stayed a lifelong friend. He passed away recently, and another one called Alistair McSween, my maths teacher. And the two of them, along with my father, kind of talked me into going to university. So off a set, literally a week after I was 17, headed for Aberdeen. Knew a couple of people there, a couple of cousins. A couple of those 40 kids that I talked about were already there. And I did a degree in mechanical engineering and stayed there for 4 years. And after that, I joined BP in Grangemouth.
Right, yeah.
Now, one of the things that, or two things that happened to me during my sort of growing up and my education time. When I was growing up in school, we used to have this amazing guy from the village used to come into school. He was called Captain MacDonald, and he toured the world and he went to all these exotic places and he'd come to school and tell us kids about them. And he really kind of fired up my imagination about the world and travel. And then when I went to university, I was actually going to meet my sister, who was also there. She was a year behind me, and she was late for this lunch meeting with me, and she sent a friend along just to kind of, keep me company until she could get there. Well, I taught her a lesson. I married her friend, and that was about 30 years ago. And we've been married a long time now. We've got our own 3 kids. But she grew up in Cardiff, and her father was a retired professor in the University of Wales. And after he retired, he went to Singapore for a year. So she ended up going to high school in Singapore. And in the year I graduated, we took off on a cheap flight to Singapore, and we spent a few months touring Asia. And we decided a couple of things during that trip. One is that we'd probably get married, and the other one was that we were going to spend as much of our time of our life as we could living and working outside of the UK. So that was the kind of couple of salient points in growing up with respect to the world. So anyway, back to my Grangemouth days, I spent 4 years there. I became a chartered engineer. I basically became a project manager, and I started on very small projects, couple of £100,000, and then they sort of grew into £1 million and £10 million, and the projects got bigger and bigger. And not long after I got chartered, I went to my boss, a lovely guy called Bob Peaty. I worked for him for 4 years. He never once called me Lewis. He always referred to me as Laddie, fondly as Laddie. At least I think it was fondly. Uh, and and I said to him, I'd love to go overseas. And his initial reaction was, no, I couldn't possibly allow that. And I kept going back every couple of days and saying, I want to go overseas. I want to go overseas. And I went to him one day, and he goes, well, yeah, how does Asia sound? And I said, it sounds absolutely, absolutely fabulous. So we were planning to get married that summer. That was 93. And we went on honeymoon to Jamaica, landed back, and the day after that, I left for Asia. Started off in Japan. Joanne stayed behind. We had a flat in Glasgow and a couple of cars. Joanne stayed behind and dealt with them, and then caught up with me in Japan. And then we went from there to Singapore, and from Singapore on to Indonesia, and we ended up spending about 5 or 6 amazing years there, working on some incredible projects back in those days. And the projects by this time had gone from being tens of millions to hundreds of millions, and starting to get into the billions. And just by happenstance, I ended up being the last expat in that company. And I'd also, in the process of living there, learnt to speak the language quite well. And I ended up being the sort of co-general manager with the local partner of this company that I was way underqualified to do, but it was an opportunity and I took it, and I ended up running this company with this local partner, and it was a fabulous idea, a fabulous experience. And I would guess at that point, somebody in BP recognized I had some potential, so they scooted me back to London, uh, put me in a sales job, which I was also completely not qualified to do. Other than as many of my aunts and uncles had pointed out, I was I was a tutor with a gift of the gab, so I could basically get myself anywhere or talk myself out of any situation that was necessary. So actually, that was back in the days where BP had a big technology portfolio and used to sell the technology. So I joined a team of 30-year-olds running to every corner of the world selling technology, and I was pretty good at it. And that's probably where my career really took off. I got put in a high potential program. The company invested a lot of money in me. I went to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and did a sort of a big capital projects management course. And then I went on to Wharton in the University of Pennsylvania Finance School and did a finance course. Then I went on to Stanford University and did the Sloan strategy course. They were absolutely incredible learning experiences, but they also gave me really significant networks.
Yeah.
And then off the back of that, I started running a number of different businesses and doing different sort of corporate roles and climbing the slippery corporate ladder,
greasy pole.
right up into the greasy pole. Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so I became a member of the BP Group leadership, and it was a fabulous experience. I got moved again. We moved to the US. Spent about 5 years there. The first time in Atlanta and then in Chicago, and that was when BP was on the acquisition trail. So I was integrating big companies that BP was buying into BP, and I ended up running a couple of businesses there. And then I had to come back into headquarters again. They like to haul you back to keep an eye on you. And so I was 20 years into BP, absolutely fabulous time, but I had this kind of discontent inside me. I was loving it, but I wasn't loving it. I had this kind of hankering to run my own company. And so 2009, I came home and told my wife that I was going to do that, and she supported me like she always does. And I stepped out and spent a few months trying to figure out exactly what I was going to do. And then I sort of decided I was going to, start an energy development company based out of the UK. So I went about trying to raise some money. If I'd known what a difficult task that was, I'm not sure I'd have done what I did. So sometimes, it's good not to know all the facts before you jump. So I actually spent several months, futile months, trying to raise capital. It was an energy development company, so anything you do in energy, the numbers start big and just get bigger, and the risk is always quite significant. And I found it impossible to raise money in the UK or Europe, quite frankly. So I took myself to Manhattan. I'd been there a few times before. I had a handful of phone numbers when I got there. And I built that list of phone numbers from about half a dozen up to about 100. And I went round these guys and told them my story, and I got better at telling my story as I went. And eventually, after about 6 months, I raised enough money to start my company.
If you don't mind me asking, how
came
much
back-
money was that,
Yep.
Lewis?
So I initially got a commitment for 200 million. Sorry. Yeah, and so as I said, in energy, the numbers start big and just get bigger. Of course, it's one thing for people to commit that money to you. It's another thing for them to transfer it to your bank account. But they transfer enough to allow you to get the company up and running, and that's exactly what we did. So, having gone from running these big companies, I now found myself underneath a desk plugging in laptops and trying to hire people into this company. And actually, a lot of my former colleagues came and joined me. And we started developing a number of projects all around Europe. And one particularly big one in the UK, it was basically building a clean coal plant and producing hydrogen from the CO2 to make power, and taking the CO2 offshore to basically store it in an old oil well. And that was an enormous
Sounds
project.
complicated.
It is. It is. If you know what you're doing, it's kind of manageable, and it's this kind of thing I'd been doing before. And I basically brought in Samsung, became a partner. Their construction and trading company out of Korea, they became a partner. There was an oil company was a partner. There was a utility company was a partner, and we actually won about 350 million euros of funding from the EU, which greatly helped in the development of it. And we basically put the whole project together, raised £3 billion, a combination of export credit finance and equity, and presented it to the government, and they said no, no thanks. And it was what I would say it was probably ahead of its political time. I mean, the UK has got a couple of these carbon storage projects now, which are just starting.
Yeah.
That was probably just too early for the
I
UK.
see.
So I sold the company to a Norwegian company they wanted the development portfolio, and I decided to move to the US and try again. So I moved to the US. Back in those days, nobody really knew what alternative energy was about in the US, and energy transition just wasn't a thing. So I ended up raising money, and I built an oil and gas company, and I used the free cash flow to basically invest in alternative energy.
Right.
And we built that up over a few years, managed to survive through COVID, where, the energy business went through a lot of turmoil during that time. But, we did pretty well, and sold the company in 22, and then came myself and my wife moved back to the UK to be near to our kids and our now grown kids again.
Right. So where did you move to, Lewis?
So we've had a house just about an hour outside of London for about 25 years. We moved back to it, and I actually decided not to do anything for a year. Renovated this house that we've had for a long time and paid no attention to it. And then I started, what an entrepreneur's brain is like. It's hard to stop. And in my spare time, I was reading European energy policy. That's what a geek I am. And what became pretty clear to me is Europe was driving everything towards electricity. If you want your car, it's got to be electric. You got to heat your house with the electric. And I was trying to think, where on earth is all this electricity going to come from? And the other side of it is, Europe's got a real energy security problem. We're running out of fossil fuels. Our energy demands are increasing significantly. It's like, how are we going to solve this problem? And as I looked at it, I sort of came to the conclusion there's only two things available to Europe right now: nuclear and offshore wind.
Right.
Nuclear takes a long time. Offshore wind, I know something about. So I initially started looking for opportunities to invest in the wind, generation piece of it, and then I actually thought, let's try something different. So I started looking at infrastructure, and I was basically looking at ports and shipping, and by chance, I had a call from a friend, one of these private equity guys in New York, who'd got a tip on some guys that owned Ardersier, and the rest is sort of history. So we basically created Haventus, acquired that site, and the private equity company, Quantum Capital out of Houston, invested 300 million into the company. We started developing the company, and then we raised another 100 million from SNIB and what was the UK Infrastructure Bank, which is now the National Wealth Fund. And so we spent 2023 consenting. We took a final investment decision at the end of March, in 24 began construction. We're about 75% of the way through construction
Right.
now. We're remarkably, for a massive infrastructure project, we're actually on time and on budget.
Wow.
And we expect to be
Lewis,
open
do you know
for
anything about
business.
ferries?
Yeah. Well, I used to get one to Lewis all the time.
Or
I
not,
think we
or
need you to
not.
build the ferries. But what's actually Ardersier going to do?
So one of the things that this is sort of counterintuitive, Tom, to build offshore wind, you need a lot of land that is quayside.
Right.
And if you look across the ports on the east coast of Scotland at the moment, there's a lot of ports. Some of them are quite small, and all of them are quite busy doing ferries and oil and gas and all kinds of other things. So the amount of land available for offshore wind is quite limited. The beauty of Ardersier is absolutely enormous. It's currently 350 acres. I've just taken an option on another 200 acres. So we're building a kilometre of quay, and that'll open up the first 200 of the 500 or so acres. And what we will do is we will basically rent or lease that land out to the developers of the offshore wind farms, what we call the fixed wind farms.
Right.
And they'll bring components in from all over the world, sort them out, and take them in smaller boats and install them in the North Sea.
Wow.
And that's what we call phase one.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Lewis, can I ask you, we've been talking earlier, and we've been talking about it for weeks and weeks and months, actually. Do you agree with the right people behind it that Scotland could be one of the first places in the world with 100% clean energy?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, if you look at, Scotland basically went through 2 leasing rounds for offshore wind and licensed 45 gigawatts. That's way more electricity than Scotland will ever
Right.
need. That's enough to feed Scotland and half of England, or with the interconnectors to Europe, part of Europe as well. So offshore wind, I mean, people jokingly call Scotland the Saudi Arabia of wind, and it's true.
True. Right.
Yeah, we have, yeah. So we have wind, which is essential, but we also have a lot of skills. We've got maritime, skills. We're a maritime nation. We've got a big coast. We've got lots of ports. We know how to deal with the water. We've got lots of experience from the North Sea oil and gas industry. And you apply all that skills to the wind industry. It's a massive economic opportunity for Scotland.
That's amazing. So all the stuff that Sir Jim McDonald has been telling us, what you've kind of, reiterated today is that 100% that we could be, the new Saudi Arabia when it comes to supplying, energy to people, especially clean energy. What I've been saying is that in the rush for the government at the moment to put the onus on consumers and individuals to spend 20 or 30,000 pound in fitting solar and whatever, what we should do is just put a levy on us all, a small levy, so that money, there's 29 million households in the UK. So if we just put a small levy on it to give money to people like yourselves and other people, I think we'll get to clean energy much, much quicker.
Yeah, and not only clean energy, Willie, you're also going to get to energy security. Because a huge component of our energy needs right now come from overseas. And what if the US decided that they're no longer going to export energy? That's a very strong possibility. What if there's an event in the Middle East that means that we can't import gas from there? We've already seen what Russia's done through the Ukraine into Germany. Energy security is fundamental to us as a kind of society and economy.
And
So
Lewis,
it not only
can I ask you what's stopping Scotland doing this? What do we need to do?
Oh, I think Scotland's progress is understated. So the political support is fantastic.
good.
You get it right from the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney and Kate Forbes, are hugely supportive of the activities here. There's basically 3 things that all those projects need. They need their consents, And actually, you know, the Marine Scotland have done a fantastic job of giving us our consents, and they're basically increasing the resource there so they can give these projects their consents. The second thing they need is a connection to the grid, and there's a process now in place that's giving all of these projects a connection to the grid. And then the third part is called a CFD. That's essentially where they get a price agreed with the government to sell the power into the grid, which effectively, Willie, is the same as your levy. It actually already exists. So all of those things are there. So the developers are developing. What the government now needs to do in Westminster is start hand out these CFDs faster, and then all of these projects will start to get built. I suspect later this year there's what's called an auction round. You'll see several Scottish projects get CFDs, and I think you'll see the activity set increase exponentially. But there's a huge opportunity beyond that. What everybody's building right now is called fixed wind, so it's basically fixed to the seabed. The next generation technology is called floating wind, and Scotland's licensed more floating wind than any other country in the world. It's literally going first in this technology. And what we're trying to do, and what we call our phase 2 at Ardersier, is we're trying to, you know, rather than each of those projects have to go out and source all of these components all over the world, what we're trying to do is catalyze the industrialization of floating wind in Ardersier, because we have the scale of it. And we're working with Asian counterparties, trying to entice them to the site to do manufacturing and assembly there. So all the floating projects can basically come to Ardersier, and it'll be a one-stop shop. If we can affect that, we can not only deploy this offshore in Scotland, we can actually do what we did in the early days when we developed the North Sea, is sell that knowledge and capability and know-how into Europe. Every country in Europe's got the same project, and they've all got limited ability to do fixed. They all have to go to floating. And it's a real opportunity for Scotland to do something very big and very different here. And you know, everything I see from the government, they're fully supportive. We've got a long way to go yet, but
Lewis,
Lewis,
amazing. It's great to know that the government's behind it. Lewis, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but this is, I mean, delighted. You probably, after our conversation earlier, you're probably the best guest that we could have got on the programme. And more power to your elbow. And I hope that the politicians keep supporting you, and hopefully with what we've got to say, maybe we'll help get some more money invested, you know, right at the core where we have to produce this clean energy. It would be great if Scotland became the powerhouse for delivering energy all over the UK.
So, look, Lewis, I'm not sure whether it was your time spent on the west coast of Lewis or whether it was the time spent in America, but you're the most positive business person we've had on about government and about Scotland's ability to lead the world in floating offshore wind. So I am going to leave today with a spring in my step, and I look forward to meeting you in person, and hopefully you can come to our conference, because this is brilliant, Willie.
Amazing
well
story.
done.
Amazing story. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you for your time, guys, and come visit us up in Ardersier.
Would love to.
I'm just glad, Lewis, that my dad didn't call me Gorbals Hockey. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Take care.
Lewis,
Bye,
thank you so much.
The Go Radio Business Show with Hunter and Haughey. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode.
Tom, great guest this week on The Boards You Can't Afford. We've got Lynne Jhangeer, who is the CEO of Linian.
I am, yes.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome, Lynne. Lynne, I've been reading the notes, and I think your question might be the best question we've ever had in the board you can't afford.
I was thinking that as well.
Anyway.
I was thinking that as well.
I will take that.
Right?
I will take that, yeah. I did think long and hard about it, to be fair.
Right, so tell us a wee bit about yourself and the business.
Okay, so I'm Lynne, and I'm now the COO at Linian. And Linian was born in 2006. My brother and I took over in 2015. And what we do is we manufacture products for the construction industry. to fasten cables to the walls and for earthing as well. Now, what does that mean? Because not everybody knows what that means. Well, I know. I was hoping you might.
I don't.
You don't.
It means you don't get a shock when you touch anything.
Yeah. It means your cables don't come down in a fire. That's what we want, right? So there was a big legislation change. In all seriousness, there was a big legislation change a good few years ago. And what had happened was some firefighters had gone into a building, and unfortunately the plastic containment that they put in had come down and the cables were hanging along the corridor, and they'd gone up to the 10th floor to rescue a lady and they couldn't get into her flat and they couldn't get her out. So unfortunately all three of them were consumed by the fire and they died. So pretty tragic. What our product is designed to do, there's no plastic, there's no plugs, there's no screws, it's not multiple components or anything. So what our product is designed to do is to keep the cables on the walls in the event of a fire, but also to make them look nice and to make sure that electricians can comply and meet the latest standards, but it's not going to cost them too much money or too much time to do that. So that's probably the most important thing for us as well. We also manufacture products for earthing, so there's loads of 5G masks going up, topical conversation sometimes, but our products basically earth the mass, and if you're out in a field and you can't get through the hard soil underneath, then our Earth Rod Pro goes onto the earth rod. If you don't know what an earth rod, it's a big copper rod. It goes onto the bottom, you put it into the chuck of your drill, drills right down, and what it does is it goes through the bedrock underneath the substrate, and it basically stops electricians having to do that and then find a new place when they hit something hard under the ground. It's been very popular. And then our latest product, we're actually very excited about this. So these are one of the first to hear about it. But our latest product...
Is it exclusive?
It's not quite exclusive, but it's pretty exclusive. We've just been very, very honoured to launch a product, and City Electrical Factors, or CEF, however you know them, have bought the first production run. So coming from a small manufacturing business all those years ago to the wholesalers, trusting that what we bring out works, they snapped up the first production run, and it's a cable clip for cable tray, and I know that'll probably be right up your alley, with all these refrigeration projects and things. So what you don't need is stainless steel cable ties and ratchet tools. If you're standing up a ladder, you literally just put the wee cable tray clip into the cable tray and it fits any tray, any pattern, and it's already taken the industry by storm. So watch this space.
So is this a product that you help produce, or did you just stumble on it and you buy it from...
No, we manufacture everything.
Yeah.
So we own all our own tooling and everything. And
Is this your design?
yeah, it's all our own inventions. Oh, aye, don't worry about that. Yeah, loads of patents. So my dad and my brother are a family business. They deal mostly with that kind of side of it. And I dealt with the sales side for years and now operations, because I've kind of been in a few different jobs. I've been in whiskey industry learning manufacturing, best place to go to learn that. I've been in plant and tool hire for years, loved that, favourite job ever. And then now I'm at Linian. I should say that's my favourite.
So who are you working with in the plant hooked to?
Gap.
Oh my God.
Gap plant.
So Ian and Douglas?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
I never thought I would leave there.
They're coming on the show, Tom, who are coming
I
on the
think
show.
they're brilliant. No, they're brilliant to work for.
Yeah.
So they are, yeah. I never thought I would leave there, but it's kind of the kind of joining piece when I joined Linian, is because I was always dead ambitious. I was never in a family. I get married and everything. And then I found out I was having a wee boy, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And stupidly, I went off on maternity leave, and I thought babies didn't do anything, because he was a dead good baby. He would just eat and sleep. And then all of a sudden he was into everything, and that's kind of approached my mum to take over this business, and he's in with me in patent lawyer meetings. We're talking to people in America and all sorts. So it's been a steep learning curve, but it's been brilliant.
Right. And where are you based?
At the north of Glasgow, just at North Canal Bank Street.
Right.
So, and that's something we're really passionate about as well, because our types of products traditionally would probably be manufactured in India or China, but we wanted to keep it here, made in the UK. It's a badge of honour in a lot of territories as well.
So how many people do you employ, and what's your turnover today?
So we've got about 17 people just now that we employ. I keep saying we're the longest running startup in Scotland just now, because it's taken us a while. Our manufacturing process is not something that we really do anymore in Scotland or anywhere across the UK. So we've had to revive all that. But our growth story is brilliant, because we had 560% growth last year. So we're up at 2.6 this year, million. With ambition to be 100 million in 10 years.
Wow.
And it's possible, entirely possible.
Push the bar. Brilliant.
Go for it, why not?
What do you think of that, Tom? Glasgow manufacturing.
Absolutely brilliant. We need thousands like you, Lynne.
Yeah.
Thousands like you.
So before we go to the question, as a family business and having a family business, how does the dynamic work?
Everybody asks that. It's so funny. So it's myself, my mum, my dad and my brother. My brother actually was an apprentice electrician for years, and then he went to night school, and then he became a design engineer. And we had an electrical wholesalers in Glasgow in the building that we're in just now, which we were actually born into, believe it or not. So that's why we've got quite a lot of experience. So even at 2 and 3 years old, we're sitting around the table listening to projects being designed, you know, in the breakfast bar. My dad getting engineers phoning them out to calls and jobs on a Saturday and everything. So it's brilliant. But yeah, my brother actually puts it quite nicely, because my brother always says, see when folk ask you, what do you say? Like, do they just want to know that we fight all the time? And I says, we don't fight all the time. We do have our ding-dongs, don't get me wrong, but he says, I just say to them, I don't know how you can't work with your family, because I can't work without them. And I thought, that's really nice, because I don't know how you felt, but certainly within our business, we're doing it for each other. And the most important thing we're doing it for is the next generation, my kids, his kids, and anybody who's within our business, it's their legacy as well that we want to leave. It's not just...
I think I've got about 17 family members working the business, and probably 16 too many, you know what I mean? But no, the good news, the reason why we don't fight is I try and keep away from them all, you know what I mean? Don't get in the same room. But no, but we would say that the family ethos and the values business has helped us greatly, and everybody works hard. A lot of people think, oh, just nepotism, you'll give somebody a job. I would think that, you know, all of the family that I know, most of them, to be fair, from my wife's side, I mean, all very good, hard workers, you know, so...
I think that's the thing. People think you get an easy ride in a family business. And I remember even working, you know, within Gap, and the kids there, they're not kids, they're older than you, but the kids there, you know, you actually have to prove yourself a lot more sometimes, I think, if you're part of the family, because people do think you're getting it for nothing. But my mum always says, like, at the end of the day, when we leave here, whatever happens, we're still family. And it's funny because I call her Gina in work, but I call her mum out of work, just to kind of separate it a wee bit. Yeah. But just wee things like that.
That's clever.
Aye.
Hey, what's your question?
Right, my question, having thought long and hard about it, is you guys are obviously very successful at what you do and have built huge legacies. If you were to start your business again in today's money, and I give you £1,000 and 3 contacts to phone, who would be your first? Who would be your second? Who would be your third contact you would phone? And what would you do with the money?
Oh, this is a really interesting question. Right. So you want to go first?
I'll go first. So, who would you call first? So this would need to be a reverse call charge, because I would call my dear old dad, because he's no longer with us, but I would love to speak to him to say, right, Dad, we're going to start again. What we're going to do, because I borrowed 5,000 from my dad to start with. Now, Lynn, the truth of the matter is that because he'd made me go to university, I understood the difference between debt and equity. So I took debt and didn't give him equity, which was a good move on my part. So I think number one, I would call my dad. Number two, I would call Peter Cummings. Peter Cummings was Bank of Scotland, and he'd been with us 30 years now, helping along the way. And the third one, and this would be reverse charge as well, would be Willie. I would definitely call Willie, because Willie would say, Tam, for God's sake, don't do that. What about you, Willie?
What would you do with £1,000?
Oh, goodness me. I maybe buy gold, Willie. Somebody wise told me that.
Very good, very good. Hey, well, I would phone, good question. But way back in the day when I first started my business, I set out to be a specialist to the licence trade when I was doing refrigeration and air conditioning. I just thought it was a sector that was crying out to be kind of shaken up. And I studied who could be the one person I could meet that would introduce me to hundreds of people within the licence trade. So I found out who was the chairman of the SLTA, and God rest him, great man called John Watterson. And John Watterson represented everybody in the licence trade in Scotland. So that introduction, I'll tell you a great story about it. I went to meet him, and I just came back from the Middle East, right? All tan, the gold sovereign on, the black shiny business card, all done in gold, right? And in to see him, and I walked in, and his son's a good friend of mine, so he'll not be upset with me saying, this cantankerous lizard took one look at me, took my business card and says, "Think I'm paying for all that, son?" Ripped my business card up and told me never to come back in with a sovereign ring on. Right? But what John did was open so many doors, and he helped me with the brewers. And then I was very fortunate. I met a man called James Mortimer, who was very well regarded in the town and very well connected. And James's network was unbelievable, and that helped me greatly. Right. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to shake him off after 40 years. Right. And I still bear the scars. But and the other guy I would phone was a guy called Ian MacLeod, who everywhere he's went in his life had ultimate faith in us. And he's asked us, so we are a big part of the business that we are today, especially abroad in Australia, America, all because when Ian was with Asda and that, he believed in what we'd done. And my £1,000, I would take, I'd split it into 3 batches of 330 quid. I'd get to my 3 contacts to tell them they had to get me 9 more contacts each.
Love it. I love it.
Ah, it's very good, Willie. Very good.
Brilliant.
Are you happy with those answers, Lynn?
Sorry, what
Are
was
you happy with those answers?
I'm very happy with them, yeah. I'm just a bit gutted you never said you were going to buy another sovereign, but never mind.
No. My sister actually bought me that for my birthday, God rest her, and I only found it again a wee while ago. My wife had it away in a wee secret drawer, so but no, I'll keep that. I'll melt it down one day and get it made into something. But well, listen, it's a brilliant story. Just finish beginning the company, a wee plug, your name and how people can get in touch with you.
Okay, so my name's Lynne Jhangeer. My name's above the door, Linian, Lynne and Ian, named after myself and my brother. And we just want to make your installations faster, safer and simpler, but we also just innovate. That's what we do. We just uncomplicate everything. So based in the north of Glasgow, and as I say, good Google, you'll find my number.
And what's your, give them your web address for sure.
It's www.linianclip.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you, I really appreciate
What a
it.
story.
Thank you.
Well, listen, Lynn, brilliant story. Good luck with the family business and keep on selling.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
I appreciate that.
Tom, another brilliant show. So I hope all the viewers and the listeners have enjoyed it, and we can't wait to bring you more tasty bits to get your teeth into next week.
And remember, everybody, put your clocks forward and never miss the Go Radio Business Show.
The Go Radio Business Show with Hunter and Haughey. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode.